Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Gnome Show After Dark. I am Josh, your humble host, and this evening, as I explained to my viewers on stream, we are watching cult classics to hidden gems, our favorite B movies by Joe Blow, original horror originals, and just did a massive dab. And we're getting into it. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope your week has been good so far. I hope it continues to be good. Let's boogie.
Did you ever hear about the time the American James Bond teamed up with homegrown militia to take down the Stuffies? Those people whose minds had been warped by a dangerous dessert that came seeping through the ground like a bubbling crude. Our heroes faced down evil corporations and fled from sentient marshmallow fluff to save the world from a junk food apocalypse. If you haven't heard this story, then strap in because we're about to tell you all about The Stuff. That's the name of both the deadly dessert and the movie that was made about it, which might be the best horror movie you never saw.
Damn it.
Over a writing and directing career that lasted more than 60 years, Larry Cohen told us some incredible stories. Stories about a maniac cop, stories about Black Caesar who dealt with hell up in Harlem.
Hell yeah.
With the It's Alive trilogy, he even told us multiple stories about killer babies, which were amusingly absurd at times, but also effectively creepy when Cohen wanted them to be. Since he was a filmmaker who made killer baby movies work, it should come as no surprise that he was able to make a great horror movie about a deadly ice cream substitute.
Oh, it was such a good death. He was a great actor.
Cohen was often praised for his dedication to crafting interesting characters, no matter what sort of story he was writing. So even when he was making a goofball movie about a tasty treat that causes horrific side effects, he was able to draw in a strong cast. For The Stuff, he reteamed with his Q, the winged serpent star Michael Moriarty. Casting him as an FBI agent turned industrial spy named David Rutherford.
Such a good
Although
actor.
most viewers will be left thinking of the character as Mo. People call him Mo because whenever they give him money, he always wants Mo. As the story begins, The Stuff has become an overnight sensation in the United States. It's delicious, has 0 calories, no artificial ingredients. And why wouldn't it become popular? The sales are leaving ice cream, yogurt, cookies, and everything else in the dust. So representatives of the ice cream industry hire Mo to find out what the stuff is made of so they can try and replicate it and beat it at its own game. Mo's investigation brings him into contact with advertising agency executive Nicole, who named The Stuff and has put together an incredible ad campaign
was some weird
for
recording.
it. Once you watch this movie, you'll never be able to get the jingle for The Stuff out of your mind. Nicole is played by Andrea Marcovici, who has done a lot of serious dramatic work in her career and saw The Stuff as a chance to be silly and have a good time. Mo is basically portrayed like an American version of Roger Moore-era James Bond, so of course, Nicole falls for him immediately and helps him investigate her employer. Mo also crosses paths with a guy called Chocolate Chip Charlie, played by Saturday Night Live's Garrett Morris.
I miss these days, man. Like the movies that we saw on like cable television back in the day. Oh, man.
Charlie was the owner of this story's stand-in for the famous Amos cookie brand until the executives behind The Stuff bought out his company and tossed him. So he's a grudge against The Stuff, and so does a young boy named Jason, played by Scott Bloom. Jason is one of the first people in America to realize The Stuff isn't the healthy treat everyone thinks it is. The Stuff, which looks like marshmallow fluff, is actually sentient, a living organism. It can move on its own, and Jason sees it doing just that inside his family's fridge. Once someone has consumed enough of it, they become stuffies. The stuff takes over their minds and bodies. It makes them do its bidding until they're used up and the stuff has to ditch their crumbling corpses. The stuff isn't manufactured, whatever it is, seeps up out of the ground, is siphoned into trucks and shipped off to consumers without any sort of processing. Realizing that the stuff could be an apocalyptic threat if it's not dealt with, Moe seeks the help of a right-wing militia leader, Colonel Malcolm Gromit Spears, played by Paul Sorvino, who operates out of a castle in the American countryside. Convincing Spears that the stuff is the work of communists, Moe gains the support of him and his soldiers. They back him up for an assault on the stuff headquarters. Along the way, Danny Aiello shows up as Mr. Vickers of the FDA. Vickers thinks the stuff is such a great product, he even feeds it to his dog. That turns out to be a terrible idea. Aiello's appearance is brief, so he gets a guest star credit, which is always weird to see on a movie instead of a TV show. Patrick O'Neill plays stuff distributor Fletcher, and Alexander Skirby in his final role as Evans, a representative of the ice cream industry. Cohen also gave Eric Bogosian, who had just starred in his film Special Effects, a cameo as a supermarket clerk. And Mira Sorvino, Paul's daughter, a future Oscar winner, makes her screen debut as a factory worker, but good luck trying to spot her. Mira was visiting her father on set one day, and he and Cohen decided to stick her in front of the camera. The idea of making a movie about a mind-altering, monstrous dessert may seem odd, but Cohen only had to observe the world around him to be inspired. This story, a satire of consumerism and corporate greed, occurred to him after he had read several newspaper articles about products being recalled. As he told Starlog magazine, quote, "We've all read about the Food and Drug Administration recalling something which ended up poisoning people or killing their children or causing women to get cancer or to become infertile. We've also read about automobile manufacturers recalling cars for structural faults which cause people to be injured. So it's very common for the public to be endangered by mass-produced products. Companies are in too much of a hurry to get their products onto the market." He was also fascinated by the amount of junk food the public consumes and continues to consume, even though we know the damage it can do to our health. So he came up with the most unhealthy dessert possible. To bring his vision of the stuff to the screen, he secured a budget of $1.7 million and a distribution deal with New World Pictures. The budget was so tight that the crew was given a $5 limit on their lunches, but Cohen had enough money to make his movie. The filmmaker and New World ran into a disagreement at the casting stage. He wanted a then unknown Arsenio Hall as Chocolate Chip Charlie.
That would have been cool if the models just cracked in half in the middle of their show because the stuff is taking over. That would be fucking awesome.
While New World insisted that he cast a more familiar Garrett Morris. But for the most part, the company left Cohen alone and let him do his thing. Production on the stuff lasted from August into September of 1984 and seems to have gone rather smoothly. Although additional photography was required when Cohen thought of a new ending for the movie after he had edited together a rough cut. That's the scene where Fletcher and Evans get their comeuppance being forced to eat a large amount of the stuff themselves. Of course, the most complicated part of making the stuff was figuring out how to bring the stuff to life on screen. Multiple methods were used to portray the stuff on screen, depending on the scene and what was required of the substance. Special effects artists Steve Neal and Rick Stratton made the stuff on location, while stop-motion animator David Allen was hired to create scenes where the stuff moves on its own. Sadly,
yeah, this movie, despite being a B movie, had some really cool, some really ghoulish and cool body horror effects. Cronenberg does it best, but Cohen did it pretty well on a shoestring budget, and that's more than you can ask of anybody. And it's a freaking classic, and we're talking about it today. So I guess. He made a decent film.
Moments that Allen animated involved baby stuff and walking stuff didn't make it into the finished film. Plastic, rubber, slime, ice cream, yogurt, shaving cream, and mashed potatoes dusted with baking flour were all used for the stuff at different points. When actors had to eat the stuff, it was a mixture of yogurt, tofu, and whipped cream. Cohen said most of the cast put on weight during the production because they had to keep eating the stuff. Markovici wasn't happy when she had to eat it because this sort of thing was not on her diet. But even more than the tasty stuff, she hated it when the stuff was played by firefighters' foam. That's because the foam was made out of fish guts, so it was disgusting to be around and didn't smell very good. A company called Effects Associated was hired for the shots of exploding factory buildings. Cohen thought the result was underwhelming, so he paid them half the amount they were asking for. This led to a lawsuit that was decided in Cohen's favor because he and Effects Associated hadn't made a copyright agreement regarding the use of the shots. Effects Associated was free to use the footage of exploding factory buildings for other projects. It wasn't exclusive to the stuff. The factory building explosions weren't the only unsatisfactory things Cohen dealt with. He was aware on set that some scenes weren't working. There was one where Mo and Nicole hook up at a hotel that was so obviously wasn't necessary. Cohen went home early that day. He left cinematographer Paul Glickman with Moriarty and Markovici to finish shooting the doomed scene on their own. That scene actually did end up in the first cut Cohen showed to New World Pictures, but then it and several others were cut because the distributor was disappointed with the movie he delivered to them. New World was expecting The Stuff to be a straightforward monster movie, something nasty and horrific. They didn't know what to do with the movie Cohen had actually made, full of satire and humor. A movie that goes for laughs more often than it went for scares. The one way they could see to make it more marketable was to make sure it was shorter and more fast-paced. Cohen described his own cut of the movie as more dense and sophisticated than the
it was
release,
scary enough.
He also admitted that some of the scenes he cut out while speeding up the pace for the distributor were extraneous. While it hurt to cut out some of the moments, there were funny scenes he wanted to keep in and wasn't able to. He also thought it was a wise decision to cut out some of the scenes he had originally included. The final cut of the movie ended up being about 30 minutes shorter than Cohen's director's cut. Now, New World had to figure out how to sell the stuff. They decided to promote the film as if it were the movie they had expected to be, not the movie it actually was. The ads and trailers ignored the satirical element and tried to sell it as a conventional horror movie. New World's first scheduled The Stuff for a March 1985 release, but delayed it a few months and ultimately gave it a limited release in the United States beginning in June of '85. Information on how it did at the box office isn't readily available at this point, but it is known that The Stuff wasn't a hit. Cohen felt New World hurt the film's chances by not focusing on the humor in the advertising, and he also said that it was dealt a blow by Mother Nature herself. A hurricane hit New York the same day The Stuff was released there. Newspapers weren't delivered that day, so the public didn't get to see that critics had given the movie positive reviews. Cohen had a friend in advertising who had created the stuff containers for the movie. During filming, Cohen was planning to do some tie-in marketing and sell the stuff nationally in those containers. Of course, this version of the stuff would have just been regular ice cream, not a substance that would turn people into stuffies. The idea was to see how much of the stuff they could sell before consumers realized it was just a movie promotion. But that plan seems to have been abandoned by the time The Stuff was released.
Yeah,
The Stuff wasn't a box office smash, but it did develop a cult following over the years as viewers caught up with it on VHS, DVD, and Blu-ray. Its appreciative audience includes Rupert Grint of the Harry Potter franchise, who lists it as one of his top 5 favorite movies. Grint told Rotten Tomatoes, quote, "I'm a big B-movie fan, and for me this ticks every B-movie box. It must be the most original idea for a monster, an evil mass-produced dessert. It's got the strangest characters I've ever seen in a film, which makes it forever favorite of mine."
Hell yeah,
The movie definitely has some bizarre characters. The concept of a killer dessert is an already unusual setup, but a lot of filmmakers could have done something interesting with the idea. None of them would have made a movie that's anything like The Stuff, though. Only Larry Cohen could have thought to make a couple of the stars, an American James Bond and a militia leader who's bummed because nobody likes him. Even Cohen himself couldn't describe The Stuff as any particular established genre. It wasn't fully horror, it wasn't fully comedy, it was its own thing, a Larry Cohen movie. Some viewers will be put off by the tone and the characters, while others love it because of how unique it is. It's a joy to watch Mo Rutherford make his way through the film, unearthing the mysteries of The Stuff. Moriarty gives such an awesome performance as this character, it almost makes you wish he and Cohen had made a whole series of Mo Rutherford movies. He didn't need to mess with The Stuff again.
You know, he does seem like the type that would do what's his name? From Airplane and Police Squad, you know, that guy. He would be that kind of character where, like, he would just show up as the oddball main character, like you would swear like he's like he walked in from a different film or from a TV show, and like you just got to deal with Mo now. You know what I'm saying? That would be fucking hilarious.
But it would have been fun to see him go on other adventures and eliminate other strange threats. One of the most memorable scenes in the movie is the first one, in which an elderly mine worker is the first to discover the stuff. He sees this white substance bubbling out of the snowy ground, and his first instinct is to stick his finger in it and give it a taste. And it's a good thing this guy will eat whatever he finds on the ground. We would have been missing out if he didn't, because we have him to thank
This can
for the
make
whole
me
movie
rich.
that follows. Entertaining scenes like the one where Jason busts up the many stuffed displays in a supermarket, or where Vickers is attacked by a stuffy dog, and where Chocolate Chip Charlie's mouth opens
funny
wide
as it is. Oh
to
my
let
god, that
stuff
too. Like it, they
spew
were
out.
they were really
Among the
fucking,
many
like,
great scenes
was
involving the stuff
nasty
is
when I
one
was
set in a
young.
motel room where the stuff comes pouring out of Mo and Nicole's bed. Shooting this scene required a revolving set, and luckily, a revolving set had recently been built for another horror production. Just weeks before, Cohen used this set to show the flood of the stuff defying gravity. Wes Craven was using the revolving room to film scenes for A Nightmare on Elm Street. Cohen was able to achieve a fast and fun pace for the stuff when he whittled down the running time for New World Pictures. But the movie goes so quickly, you can tell it's jumping over transitional moments and leaving out some information. It feels a bit wild and scattered, so it's interesting to hear that fans might have the chance to see a director's cut someday. The non-profit outhouse organization Denver Film recently found that a 35mm print in the possession of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences is the director's cut. Those 30 minutes Cohen removed in 1985 are in that print. So hopefully someone will be releasing that soon. The film
Release
that
the
may
Cohen cut.
or may not be the third entry of the House franchise, which seemed to begin as horror
House is
comedies
one of my
that
favorite
could
movies, too.
possibly be viewed by children. Is there a tangible connection between the horror show and the House series? Well, let's find out. The House franchise, which began in 1986 with a film directed by Steve Miner and produced by Sean S. Cunningham of
This is one of those movies that scared me as a child, and so I'm old enough to. Do y'all remember Errol's? I do. I used to go to Errol's Video all the time, and they had all their videos were in these giant square boxes, like giant tall squared boxes with plastic sleeves over them, and like it was Betamax at this time, so were they Betamax? Yeah. For a little while they were Betamax, and like I rented House. I remember getting that. It's one of my favorite films. Because it has the guy from Night Court, God bless his soul, he's passed now. But he's in it, and the guy from Greatest American Hero is also in it, and the guy from Cheers is also in it, and there's a pig lady that's also in it, and a rather disturbing set of creatures. And it's a haunted house type thing, so it's a really good little film. Let's check it out, because I like if you haven't seen this one, I'd really check it out. And even the second one is pretty good, but after that it gets kind of dicey. But all of them qualify as B movies, like absolutely.
Friday the 13th fame has become known throughout the years for having 4 entries in the series that are largely unrelated, besides the fact that the central action of the film involves a mysterious, creepy house. The first movie functions as a horror comedy, while 1987's House 2, the second story, goes even lighter in tone than its predecessor as a new supernatural comedy that doesn't involve the storyline or characters from the first film.
Different person, different
At least House 2 has a tangible tonal relation to the first movie, which makes it feel more at home within the franchise, because the same can't be said about 1989's House 3. Or is that House 3 the horror show? Perhaps it's just the horror show. Maybe all 3 are accurate,
Okay, so I
depending
remember
on
the
where you
horror
live
show,
and
kinda.
how you were introduced to the film. That may just be part of the House franchise in
He was a
name
great actor
only.
too.
Confused yet? It's that uncertain
Richard Mall.
pedigree
That's
that,
the guy
at the
from the
very
first floor,
least,
house.
makes the movie fascinating to dive into. The whole
Lance
concept of a film being connected to a larger franchise and name only generally occurs when a derivative work, typically a remake, adaptation, or reimagining, is so different from the work it took its name from that the only thing tying it to the original
from that
material
70s
is the
film?
title, possibly a few characters, and even the broadest connection to the actual
That's
premise.
not terrible
Essentially,
effects for that
you could
time.
have the project stand perfectly on its own
a
if
great-
references to the
Can we just just stop and appreciate how good like movie posters were back then, like when they really mattered, you know, when it was a thing. Oh man. I mean, like, yeah, I mean, they're in movie theaters and then, like, I guess they still, but like before, like they were a big thing. Like, you know, those are types of things you had in your room and around the house. Like, I mean, I guess you still had them. Like, I guess, but they were like really big back in the day. Like, this is fucking beautiful. I think I might want to get one of those for my room or something. That's really cool. That's really cool.
source material were removed. House and House
Definitely
2,
the
the second
first one,
story, even lacking direct storyline
Maybe
and
displayed
character
as one.
connections, at least involves a similar supernatural element involving comedy and a haunting of sorts within the home. The horror
It's-
show
they're
plays
all
things a bit
haunted house
darker
movies.
and centers on a
That's the
vicious
connective tissue.
serial killer named Meat Cleaver Max Jenke, who's played by Brian James, and a detective named Lucas McCarthy,
Mr.
played by
James.
Lance Hendrickson,
God rest
who is
his-
hot on his trail.
rest
When
in
Meat
peace.
Cleaver Max is finally brought down by McCarthy, the crazed serial killer won't let an inconvenience like death stop his murderous rampage. Meat Cleaver Max seems to meet his end after a stint in the electric chair, but crazed killer vowed revenge before he met his end, and he's determined to get it.
That guy, the bad guy, was also in at least one Tales from the Crypt, but probably more.
Even
He's been in everything.
beyond the grave.
Coming back to fuck you
That
up.
guy.
Meat Cleaver Max is intent on piling up his body count and living up to his deal with the devil to frame
He's a great
McCarthy
villain.
for his murders. The house comes into play when Meat Cleaver Max begins scaring the McCarthy family, who have moved into a new home, and the parapsychologist they have hired named Peter Campbell, who's played by Tom Bray, who explains to them that the only hope to stop Meat Cleaver Max for good is to destroy his evil spirit. And there we have our broad connection to the premise of the first two House movies. Initially released in the US as The Horror Show, which allowed it to be free from the ties of the House franchise name, the film has taken its place over the years as a legit part of the House series, even though it truly lacks any real connection to its predecessors. While the film was branded as The Horror Show in the States, it was released as House 3 in Europe, and it was distributed as House 3 The Horror Show on home video, October 1989. Perhaps because the film flopped at the box office in the US, producer Sean S. Cunningham figured
Oh, wow.
the brand recognition of the house name would give it an assist in foreign markets. It might confuse you even more that when they got to making a real sequel in the franchise, they kept the numbering based solely on the foreign distribution title being
Wow,
House 3
okay, so that's
and not
why-
the Horror
that's
Show.
why
That
they-
means
that's wh- okay.
if you went to the video store in the 90s, now keep up, and felt like having a complete House marathon, you only ever found House 2, and House 4 on the horror shelf, and not House 3, regardless of whether it's in the franchise or out of it. There's no denying that the Horror Show has some fun moments to offer fans of the genre. For starters, the Horror Show doesn't skimp on bloodshed, and it's loaded with profanities.
It's coming back.
What the fuck are you talking about?
It's not over yet. He's coming back
I
for
need
you.
this like a fucking hole in the head.
If you like your horror films with characters that swear like
Classic.
sailors, this one's for you. And in terms of gore and the effects work on display, the excessively graphic scenes that dominate the
Ew.
horror show are generally top notch.
Oh, that's kinda
With
cool.
work from the likes of Greg Nicotero and Howard Berger, you
Really?
know you're going to get some practical makeup effects to remember. Look to when Meat Cleaver Max is put to death in a very memorable execution that shows the character coming to a very messy end, or an intense sequence involving Lucas trying to capture Max, who has body parts all over his kitchen. A lot of the film really is a gore fiend's dream, and
I don't
it
miss
certainly
Ashante.
doesn't lack
What do you
in
think?
that department, or
Maybe
seems
something we might want to
stifled
check out.
by the film's limited budget. So let's talk the film's cast, which has Lance Henriksen leading the way as an always reliable presence in a movie like this. I mean, pick your poison. This is a man who's appeared in genre classics like The Terminator, Aliens, Near Dark, and Pumpkinhead, so you know you're always going to get a committed performance. And in all honesty, Henriksen gives the material a lot more value because his cliched.
Hey, you know what? Henriksen gives a lot of value to any material that he's attached to. Like even when he's hamming it up, I remember there's a sci-fi film, one of the many sci-fi films with him in it, but there was one where I think he was like an evil android or something. They looked rather like the Borg. I don't know. It's very hazy. But he was good in that. He was also a really good cheating, lying cowboy in The Quick and the Dead. Of course, in Aliens, Alien 3, when the dude had his ear hanging off, and you really had to question, you like, is that just a bishop? And apparently no, it was the real deal. Motherfucker just wasn't fazed by having his ear hanging off of his face. I guess dude just was like, whatever. We're taking you back, Ripley. No matter what. Henriksen always gives it a lot of gumph when he plays a role. Also, Millennium, and I was really angry that they never finished Millennium because that was really getting good.
Tormented cop character is given considerable power based on his performance. The character always seems like he's on the verge of exploding, which at times makes him more frightening than
And Pumpkinhead.
his opponent. Brian James is certainly fun to watch as Meat Cleaver Max and is genuinely frightening during certain moments with a signature evil laugh to match his depravity. The behind-the-scenes team offers a connection between this film and his predecessors as the photography of Mac Alberg is back on display, but he gives this installment a more grounded look when compared to the previous House films. Composer Harry Manfredini, who has been in league with producer Sean S. Cunningham since composing Friday the 13th, is also on board providing the score for this film after clearly having a lot of fun with House and House 2. Now, if you're wanting a story that makes a lot of sense, you might be left wanting. If you pay attention to the credits, you'll notice that Alan Smithy is credited as one of the two screenwriters.
You gotta be.
That's before they explain it. That's when a writer doesn't wish to be attached to the film by name anymore.
Fucking kidding me.
Alan Smithy is a commonly used pseudonym for someone who doesn't want to be credited on a film. And in this case, it was Alan Warner who tried to pretend like the horror show doesn't exist. To the writer's credit, they do craft some interesting moments that play well during the film. The constant repetition of wondering about what might be going on does create some anxiety. This proves to be very true during a scene where McCarthy is yelling at Max, but everybody else thinks he's yelling at his daughter Bonnie's boyfriend, which nicely leads into McCarthy being accused of his murder later on. No one is winning any Academy Awards for Best Original Screenplay here, but I wouldn't say it's worthy of the Alan Smithy
gross,
treatment. Another interesting behind-the-scenes tidbit about the horror show is that director David Blythe was replaced by James Isaac, and the late James Isaac ends up being the perfect choice for the job due to his career creating creatures in such films as Gremlins, and he also did work on House 2, The Second Story. Isaac made his directorial debut on the horror show, and he would go on to direct Jason X and Skinwalkers. In an interesting late 80s horror twist, the horror show does end up sharing some similarities with the Wes Craven 1989 film Shocker,
it was entertaining,
which arrived a few months after the horror show. They both featured crazed killers who vow revenge while being executed, and then end up coming back through fairly ludicrous means. In Shocker, Horace Pinker makes a deal with the devil and comes back as pure electricity.
And that's the dude from X-Files, that's Skinner, and also the dude from the Winchester show, Supernatural. from that show, and also he was in The Outer Limits, I believe. He's been in a lot of stuff. He's been on TV forever.
With the ability to possess others to continue his murderous rage and get revenge on young Jonathan. In the horror show, Meat Cleaver Max is executed, makes a deal with the devil in order to continue his revenge, and becomes a ghost, hiding in a basement boiler. Horace Pinker obviously got the better end of the afterlife evil powers and hiding places, but
Fair
I'm
enough.
pretty sure we missed a good opportunity
Brian
for some
James
kind
is
of
far
crossover
more
movie.
fucking terrifying.
Could Shocker very well be The Real House 4? Maybe House 3.5? I'm willing to hear any idea that would make this mashup work. I honestly think the legacy of the horror show, or whatever you choose to call it, is that it kind of built up a reputation as a lost film because you could never really find it as House 3, at least here in the States. So the third film always felt like some mystery. Thanks to the power of the internet, we all know why we could never locate it.
Anybody that's in my foreign or overseas audience, can you tell me your experiences with House 3? Because I I remember it as horror show. I remember seeing it on the shelves, but I never knew it was connected to House either. That's crazy. So let me know.
Because as we glanced over the horror show, we had no idea we were overlooking the long-lost third entry of the House franchise. In all honesty, the horror show is a bit of a tonal whiplash after the horror comedy that was House and
House,
the
man.
lighthearted
It's a
monster
great film.
movie Antics of House 2, but that doesn't make it any less fun to watch and makes for a fun debate with other horror fans about its true placement in the franchise or as merely a standalone effort waiting to be discovered by more people.
Fuck you!
King is a hard author to translate into film. He has a true skill of fleshing out characters in a way that can ground
All right,
even the most
what's
ridiculous
next?
ideas. King adaptations run the gamut of perfection to heartbreaking, and most of the films fall flat. The best ones are made by a select few, with Stanley Kubrick gone and Rob
Are we
Reiner
getting
doing
Maximum
whatever
Overdrive?
he's doing. We need Frank Darabont to adapt all Stephen King films. You're on the wrong side of history, MC.
The wrong side.
The problem is one must wade through a river of shit to find gold. There is a middle ground. Some very solid films based off King's work. One of these is an old favorite of mine.
Okay.
A monster film with a great antagonist, an interesting story, and an unsettling number of real rats. I am talking about
The Graveyard Shift.
Okay, I
based on
remember
King's
the
short
book,
story by the same
and
name.
I
It's a
sort of
brisk
remember
18
the
pages, and because of that, the film does a pretty good job of staying faithful to the original material. Our lead, Hall, is a drifter who's wandering the land after the passing of his wife. He gets a job at the local Bachman Mill, a nod to King, and offered a position on the cleanup crew over the 4th of July weekend. The foreman, Warwick, needs to clean up the basement and get rid of the rat infestation before the local government shuts the mill back down. That's what gets our band of hardworking men and women into the path of the monster. It's a simple premise, and one they don't try and overcomplicate. Graveyard Shift is a monster movie. And full disclosure, I absolutely love monster movies. They make everything better. Take a look at Toolbox Murders, a great slasher, where the killer is actually a monster. You'll be missed, Mr. Hooper. You'll be missed. In terms of actual filmmaking, this movie is surprisingly competent. The original short story was brisk, basic, and to the point. That needs to be said, because what really holds this film together is that snappy rhythmic pace. By the 20-minute mark, it sets up both Hall, the boss man Warwick, the monster, and the rat infestation. At the 40-minute mark, we get the holiday weekend cleanup job, and at 1 hour, we are chasing the creature. They don't waste any time here because the original aim was to be a fun and terrifying monster movie, nothing more. The killer bat lives and moves around underground tunnels that exist below the entire town and can be accessed beneath the old mill. Everything looks worn and lived in. You can almost smell the must. They used a real mill. Everything in it looks muddy, and every actor is constantly sweating. They have convincing sound stages for the basement and tunnel system as well. The main feeding ground for the killer bat makes great use of an old school matte painting technique. The look works. Graveyard Shift conveys King's story setting
may have to
on a
go
small
and,
budget.
rewatch this
What's a
film.
good
I haven't
setting?
seen
You
it
can't
in-
fill it with interesting characters.
Since
now,
I was a
must
child.
admit that most of the characters here are one note, but I will commend that everyone looks the part. Hall, Brogan, and Danson all look like working men. The foreman Warwick and Brad Dourif Exterminator are two
Oh, wow.
prize-winning characters in this film. Coming off the success of Child's Play, we get more of an extended cameo from Dorff, and he wastes no time with a smaller role. Early on in the film, he gives a monologue about his hatred for rats and his time in Vietnam. That's so good, it might have been written for another film.
They cover it with a flaming rice ball, and let me tell you, that gray, black son of a bitch would have nowhere else to go but inside.
Seriously, if I just add some dramatic music?
They cover it with a flaming rice ball, and let me tell you, that gray, black son of a bitch would have nowhere else to go.
You might just have to give the man an Oscar. Let's be clear. This is Stephen Mock's film. He
I may have
gives
to
not
check
only
it
the
out
best
again
performance,
just for that
but it really gives
performance.
us one of the most underrated villains.
You know, it's like that that monologue by Shaw from Jaws about the sharks and like the sinking of that ship. Yeah, like Mr. Dorff is always intense in everything.
Holy shit, does this man steal the show. First off, he does what may be the most interesting accent I have ever heard.
Now we can get you that audition on Star Search. Job split evenly, night by night. Tried to keep it interesting. You ever run the pickup? When's the last time you've been to a graveyard?
It's not just good.
It's amazing.
I watched this movie a few times trying to find a point where he drops it or doesn't fall through, but this man is a master of his craft, and his weird idiolect helps carve out his own version of Warwick. He's a tough, crew-cut, short-sleeve wearing hard-ass, and there are hints of something more. In the third act, with the monster bat in full force, the group splits up and Warwick goes full metal jacket. With the use of dirt as war paint, his method for crawling, and even the way he fights, it's obvious that he's more than just a foreman at a mill. Warwick has been in battle. With the Vietnam monologue from Dorff, it's clear that the war has a bit more to do with the story than a one-off speech. It explains a lot. His haircut and drill sergeant-like attitude.
Yeah.
Think about it. He comes back from war and opens up an abandoned mill in a small Maine town that would be its driving economy. That right there would explain why he seems to give a shit less about the people who keep disappearing. Not only his livelihood, but the town is at stake, with the mill bordering on closing. You can see it's a really poor small town with only one bar. Now, none of this is said, but the puzzle pieces are there. As fun as this film is, it has its problems. The directing is passable, but could have been more stylistic and helped push more fear for the monster. There are many times where the threat doesn't seem that bothersome to most. The Jinn himself doesn't do much, but has one smart moment at the end. He freaks out, which you don't usually see in these types of films. He just couldn't handle the fact that a giant bat was murdering his fellow coworkers, and has an honest, real reaction.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good creature effect.
There's also some very awkward and poorly mixed ADR that pops up throughout the film. It's not terribly distracting, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it.
Basement cleanup. Clean up this, Warwick.
Graveyard Shift isn't a perfect film, but for the life of me, I don't understand its 13% Rotten Tomato score. The Dark Tower, Golden Years, and Dreamcatcher all have higher Rotten Tomato scores. Dreamcatcher. A movie with alien ass worms played dramatic and straight. That has a higher score than Graveyard Shift?
Oh,
Come on.
that's great.
Jesus Christ. Not only is its score fatally low at 13%, but it's always at the bottom of every Stephen King film list. I'm taking a lonely road here, but it must be said. Graveyard Shift is a good movie. It's not supposed to be the shining level of terror or a misery type of commentary, but can't a man make a fun monster movie? There are far worse King films, and this has been unfairly grouped in for too long. No more. Graveyard Shift has an amazing antagonist,
Yeah, I
a
was
cool
not
monster,
pleased with the Dark
and some
Tower.
great looking set pieces.
Not one bit.
It deserves a retrial. It deserves a second chance. And I'll leave you with that, like the good foreman once said.
Show's over.
Nice. Thank you guys over at Joe Blow Horror Originals. You're always on point with your movie reviews and opinions like that. Yeah, spot on, guys. I hope you enjoyed that, ladies and gentlemen. If any of these movies piqued your interest, go see them. They're absolutely worth it. Go on over to Joe Blow Horror Originals and Joe Blow, like their other channel, their main channel. Give them some love. You won't be disappointed. Like, subscribe, and share. Every bit helps. Thank you very much for joining me, ladies and gentlemen. Be safe, happy, and healthy. I love you all. And I'll see you in the next one.